Okay, let's talk about the functions of the liver and the functions of the kidney. So the liver carries out over 200 functions, but your functions normally fall within 3 categories: metabolic regulation, hematological regulation, and bile production. And this is all found in your A&P textbook under 24-6, the physiology of the liver. So let's start with metabolic regulation. So in metabolic regulation, this is going to be the liver's primary function. And so its function is to regulate the composition of the circulating blood. And the way it does that is through metabolic regulation. So in A here, carbohydrate metabolism, the liver is responsible for stabilizing blood glucose levels. If the glucose levels decrease, then your liver cells called hepatocytes are going to break down glycogen, the stored sugars, and release glucose into the bloodstream until it gets back up to your homeostasis levels. If the blood glucose rises too high, then the hepatocytes do the reverse. They remove the glucose from the bloodstream and synthesize it into glycogen or lipids for storage. In lipid metabolism, the liver is going to regulate the circulating levels of the lipids in the blood. When the lipid levels decline, the liver breaks down its lipid reserves and releases the breakdown products into the bloodstream. On the flip side of this, when the levels are too high, then the lipids are removed from the bloodstream and they're stored in the liver. Amino acid metabolism. If you have an excess of amino acids in the bloodstream, the liver will remove the amino acids and then they can be stored in the liver, or they can be synthesized into proteins, because remember, you put a bunch of amino acids together, amino acid plus an amino acid plus an amino acid plus an amino acid and so on, then you get a protein. Waste product removal. Excuse me. When converting the amino acids to lipids or carbohydrates, or when breaking down those amino acids to get energy, the liver is going to strip off the amino groups off of the proteins in a process called deamination. And then it will form ammonia, which is a toxic waste product that is then peed out of the body. The liver is also responsible for vitamin storage. So your fat-soluble vitamins, KADE, K-A-D-E. So if you'll think about it like a man's name, KADE, and your vitamin 12, these will be absorbed from the blood and stored in the liver, and they can be released when you're eating a diet that is deficient in any of those vitamins. In mineral storage, the liver is going to convert iron absorbed from the blood in a form called ferritin, and it will store that protein in the liver. Then you have drug inactivation. So the liver is responsible for removing and breaking down different drugs, and this is going to limit how long those drugs are active in your system. So one of the things when they're prescribing medications, they have to be very aware of how long it takes the liver to clean that drug out of the bloodstream. And if it cleans it out very quickly, then you have to take that medicine more often. If the liver doesn't clean that drug out very quickly, then you take that drug less often because it stays in the system very much longer. Okay, now let's go down to hematological regulation. So phagocytosis and antigen presentation is going to be done by the Kupffer cells in the liver, and these are found in the liver sinusoids, and they're going to engulf old and damaged red blood cells, therefore releasing the iron. And if you'll think back up to where we were talking about mineral storage, once that red blood cell is destroyed in the liver, then you have that free iron floating around, And the liver is going to convert that iron to ferritin and will store it for future use so that you aren't getting rid of that iron. Then you have synthesis of plasma proteins. The hepatocytes or liver cells are going to synthesize and release most of the plasma proteins called your albumins. And these albumins are responsible for the osmotic concentration of the blood. Then you have removal of circulating hormones. So the liver can remove hormones from the bloodstream. Some of the hormones that it removes is going to be your epinephrine and norepinephrine, because after your fight or flight response, you don't want your body in a state of alarm. You want your body to calm down. So you need to be able to get rid of epinephrine and norepinephrine. It can also get rid of insulin. Again, once your sugar levels in your blood have stabilized, then you don't need a lot of excess insulin floating around in your bloodstream. Also removes excess thyroid hormones and steroid hormones, such as your sex hormones, and your corticosteroids, which are usually called your stress hormones. Your liver can also remove antibodies. So the liver is going to absorb and break down antibodies. After those antibodies are finished with the immune response, you need to get rid of them. So the liver is the one that is going to get rid of those antibodies and break them down into amino acids, and it will store them in the liver and later recycle them to make more hormones or more antibodies or other kinds of proteins. Then your liver is also responsible for the removal and storage of toxins. So especially like insecticides that are on the fruits and vegetables that we eat, those can be very, very damaging to the body. So the liver will remove them from the bloodstream and store them in lipid deposits. So they're basically trapped in lipid droplets so that they can no longer disrupt other cellular functions. And the last category is bile production. So the liver is going to synthesize bile and excrete it into the lumen of the duodenum, which is that first segment of the small intestine. And bile salts are synthesized from cholesterol in the liver, and those bile salts are responsible for breaking down lipid droplets in a process called emulsification. So these bile salts are going to facilitate the interaction between lipids and lipid digesting enzymes that are released from the pancreas. After this lipid digestion is completed, then those bile salts will promote the absorption of the lipids by the intestines. Okay, now let's talk about renal function. So this is going to be found in your A&P textbook under 26-3 called the Basic Processes of Urine Formation. So your renal function is broken down into 3 categories: filtration, reabsorption, and then secretion. So in filtration, your blood pressure is going to force water and solutes across the wall of the glomerular capillaries and into the capsular space. The solute molecules that are small enough to fit through or pass through the filtration membrane are going to be carried by the surrounding water molecules. Okay, so you're filtering out all the solutes that can pass through. Then reabsorption. In reabsorption, you're going to remove the water and solutes from the filtrate. Excuse me. And most of the reabsorbed materials and nutrients that the body can use are going to be reabsorbed, because you want to recycle and reuse as much as possible in the body and not pee out anything that is not purely a waste. So you're going to reabsorb anything that your body can reuse. You're going to reabsorb solutes by either simple diffusion or through carrier proteins, and you reabsorb the water through osmosis. Then in secretion, Secretion is the transport of those solutes from the peritubular fluid across the tubular epithelium and into the tubular fluid. The secretion is necessary because filtration does not force all of those dissolved materials out of the plasma. This tubular secretion, which removes substances from the blood, can further lower the plasma concentration and get rid of extra undesirable materials such as drugs.